Nuno Álvares Pereira was born in 1360 in Cernaque do Bom Jardim, the son of the prior of the military order of the hospital. He grew up in his father's house, where he began to learn the arts of war. He proved to be an excellent knight and soldier from an early age, but it was reading that influenced him the most. He was an enthusiastic reader of chivalry books, particularly the tales of the Round Table. Among King Arthur's companions, he especially admired the figure and example of Sir Galahad in the quest for the Holy Grail, and he soon became a devout Christian, always keeping his Bible close by. At the age of 13, he entered the court of King Fernando of Portugal, where he was knighted alongside his brother Diogo Álvares Pereira, wearing armor borrowed from Dom João, Master of Avis. Although he had decided to remain celibate, he was forced by his father to marry Leonor de Alvim at the age of 16 in 1376, a wealthy widow from Azambuja. According to his father, this would secure his future. Nuno Álvares Pereira would establish himself with his wife in her lands in the north of the country. In the meantime, he came into contact with the English troops stationed in Portugal, which further refined his great qualities as a military strategist. His life reached a decisive point in 1383 with the death of King Fernando without legitimate heirs, except for his daughter, Dona Beatriz, married to Dom João I of Castile. This would lead to the loss of independence, and Nuno Álvares Pereira supported the claims to the throne of his friend João, Master of Avis, the illegitimate son of King Pedro, who was elected regent of Portugal. The Master of Avis appointed Nuno Álvares as frontier commander of Alentejo. Gathering his troops and English mercenaries, he headed towards the column of Castilian troops that had already crossed the Portuguese border, and had his first battle at Ateleiros. Aware that Nuno would intercept them despite their larger numbers, the Castilians sent an emissary to the Portuguese army general, attempting to dissuade him. Faced with the Portuguese refusal, the Castilian army marched towards them, with one of the commanders being Nuno Álvares's brother, Pedro Álvares Pereira, prior of the Order of the Hospital. The Portuguese responded to the larger enemy force with recent defensive tactics, already employed by the English against their French enemies. The vast majority of soldiers dismounted and formed spear walls against the Castilian cavalry charges. The forces of Castile suffered heavy losses, particularly among the heavy cavalry, which was the most important Castilian force. This battle proved that it was possible to resist a heavily armed army composed mostly of noble knights, using popular forces. It was an important victory in resisting Castilian domination and bolstered the cause of the Master of Avis. On August 14, 1385, his growing fame would become legendary on the day of the Battle of Aljubarrota. The Castilian army once again entered the country, this time with a force of over 30,000 men, commanded by King João of Castile himself. The future King João, Master of Avis, shared command with Nuno Álvares Pereira, vastly outnumbered by the enemy, with less than 10,000 men. Choosing the terrain, setting traps and stakes, positioning English archers and crossbowmen on the flanks of the small slope, and once again employing initial defensive tactics, the Portuguese forces decimated the cream of the Castilian and French cavalry and routed the disorganized infantry struggling to catch up. At the end of the day, Nuno Álvares's banner fluttered victoriously on the battlefield among the thousands who perished. It was an absolute disaster for Castile, which took years to recover from the catastrophe of Aljubarrota. Taking advantage of the disarray of the Castilian forces, Nuno himself advanced with his troops into Castile and in October of that same year, won the Battle of Valverde. This time, he did not employ his characteristic defensive tactics and was heavily pressured by the superior Castilian forces that nearly surrounded him. However, a daring attack on the enemy army's leadership, resulting in the eventual death of their general, the Master of Santiago, and Nuno's banner emerging victorious amidst the enemy, proved too much for the Castilians who fled the scene. From that victory onwards, the Castilian forces refused to engage in battle against forces commanded by Nuno Álvares Pereira, considering him invincible. After a truce was signed with Castile, the marriage between Nuno Álvares Pereira's daughter, Dona Beatriz, and one of the king's sons, the future Duke of Bragança, Don Afonso, was agreed upon in 1401. For his services, the king granted him titles and lands. He became the lord of nearly half of Portugal. He participated in the conquest of Ceuta in 1415 and was invited by the king to command the garrison that would stay there. However, the constable refused, as he desired to leave military life behind and embrace a religious one. Before entering the convent, he distributed his wealth among his grandchildren. After the death of his wife, he became a Carmelite. He entered the order in 1423, at the Carmo convent, which he had built as a fulfillment of a vow. Upon becoming Friar Nuno of Santa Maria, he renounced the titles of count and constable and intended to beg on the streets, which alarmed the king. The king asked the future King Duarte, who held great admiration for Nuno, to convince him not to do such a thing. The prince convinced Nuno to only accept alms from the king, which was accepted. He walked through the streets of Lisbon, distributing alms to those in need. In the convent, he had a large cauldron used by his men in military campaigns, where meals were prepared for the poor. There is a story that the Castilian ambassador went to the Carmo convent to meet Nuno and asked him what his position would be if Castile invaded Portugal again. Nuno is said to have lifted his habit and shown, underneath it, his chainmail, indicating his willingness to serve his country whenever necessary and declaring that, if the King of Castile were to wage war on Portugal again, he would simultaneously serve the religion he professed and the land that gave him birth. During his last year of life, King João visited him at Carmo. King João always considered Nuno Álvares Pereira his closest friend, the one who placed him on the throne and saved Portugal's independence. He died on November 1, 1431, All Saints' Day, at the age of 71, surrounded by the king and the princes. He is one of Portugal's greatest warriors of all time, a fervent defender of the idea of an independent Portugal and a devout Christian. He was canonized as Saint Nuno of Santa Maria by Pope Benedict XVI on April 26, 2009. Thank you for watching the video, and if you liked it, please press the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to receive news, updates and new videos. From Rex Lusitani, we hope to see you soon. Thank you.